Welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified Doctor of Naturopathy, Dr. Stephen Cabral, shares with you exactly how you can reverse aging, take back your health, and live a life full of energy and passion, with new 20-minute episodes every single day to keep you healthy and engaged. Now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. We're here today, episode 2896 of the Cabral Concept. I want to go over right now a very specific diet that you do not want to be following, especially in the long term this coming year. So I know that January, or really the start to any big body transformation program, usually begins with a diet-based plan. And let's say 9 times out of 10, it asks you to go very low carbohydrate. Maybe 0 carbs, maybe 25 carbs, maybe 50 carbs or so maximum per day. What I will say to you is that that is very common, and there's actually nothing wrong with that. What is wrong with it is what happens next. If you do that for longer than 3 to 4 weeks, you're going to start to see detrimental effects. And today, I've talked about this before, many of the issues that can happen with your metabolism. I want to go a little bit deeper on this, but I also want to make sure that you know that it's not all doom and gloom. That if you follow our functional medicine detox for 21 days, or you do our fat velocity-based system, yes, for 21 days, you're definitely going low carb. But there needs to be then an integration of carbs back into your diet. If not, I'm going to show you exactly what happens, give you the science behind it. But what I will say is this: not everyone can handle the same level of carbohydrates. So as you begin to add carbohydrates back in, you're simply trying to find out what your tolerance are for those carbohydrates. Meaning, like, how many can you eat before you start to rebound in weight? And over time, though, you actually want to begin to reverse diet and add more carbs in as you're improving your overall metabolism, as well as energy output. So let's get into it right now. Reasons why you don't want to go low carb for really more than a month. And here's why. Over time, specifically very low carb, I would consider very low carb sub 50 grams per day, or specifically sub 25 to 30 grams per day for sure. Okay, so let's look at this. Really good research on this. This is not brand new. This has been out for a while. So there is an alteration in the gut microbiome. When you take in too few carbohydrates, you lose the diversity of the bacteria in your gut. And that can actually affect everything from your overall gut health and motility, bowel movements, to immune function, and potentially even your mental health. Again, I'll link up these studies for you. This one was done all the way back in 2007, and I'll link that up for you, but really great data behind it. All right, the second reason why you don't want to go low carb for too long is its issues on insulin sensitivity. So initially, low carb diets actually help insulin sensitivity. You don't spike your blood sugar levels as much. You might not have to produce as much insulin. All of that sounds like a very good thing. The problem is that over time, your body may not be able to respond with insulin in the proper way to carbohydrates when it sees carbohydrates in the future. Because, I mean, let's face it, after all, like, eventually you're going to start eating carbs again. Most people do. There are very few people, fractions of 1%, who say, I'm just never going to eat carbohydrates again, right? Very few people. And so I just don't want you to be stuck in that particular path in life where you're not able to eat them again. And this goes back to a third reason, is metabolic flexibility. I'll probably do another whole show on this, but really great study. This was done in 2012. It demonstrated that long-term adherence to a high-fat, low-carb diet can impair the body's ability to switch between burning fat and carbohydrates, known as metabolic flexibility. So we want to make sure that your body's able to tap into fat when your heart rate's at a lower range, and you can easily break down fat as fuel. And then if it's ever at a higher range, or as needed in fight or flight, you can use glucose. You can use carbohydrates. Important to be able to look at that. All right, the fourth one I wanted to share with you is on hormonal balance. Now, this is something that we specialize in our clinical practice, because we run so many of a lab called the stress, mood, and metabolism, which looks at estrogen, progesterone, DHEA, and testosterone, cortisol over the day, so over 24 hours. And then we also look at thyroid, not just TSH, but T4, T3, and TPO antibodies. So we look at this and we find, especially in women, not as much in men, but definitely in women, After about 4 to 6 weeks of going low carb, we start to see a real tax on especially cortisol at night, potentially poor sleep, and lowered thyroid function. So it's my goal to always improve people's metabolism and not lower it. And your thyroid is literally a huge part of your metabolism. So you want to be able to make sure you're burning calories on a high basis, on a daily basis. And you want to make sure that your circulation is good, hormone levels are good, not just with thyroid, but cortisol and sex hormones too. So big implications for going too low carb for too long. If you are an athlete or you're someone that likes to work hard in the gym and compete, going low carb for a long period of time may affect athletic performance. Now, I know there's a lot of people on keto-based diets, and they seem to do just fine in all of their athletic endeavors, and that's fantastic. So what I'm saying is these may not all affect you, but you want to see if they do affect you or not. And if so, it's at least something to think about. The next one is psychological and cognitive effects. So many people on low-carb diet, it affects their mood, it affects their ambition, it affects their drive. They have more anxiety, they have more worry, they have more stress. And there's actually there's great studies on all of these, of course, but this one was done a little over 40 years ago. And it discusses the role of carbohydrates in the synthesis of serotonin and its implications on mood and cognitive function. So really important that we look at the science behind this, because we know that consuming carbohydrates can improve neurotransmitters, which can improve not just the reward center and drive of the body, but the happy feel-good side and anti-anxiety side as well. All right, couple more to go. The next one is with an potential increase in inflammatory markers. So some people on a higher saturated fat and lower fiber diet may increase inflammatory markers. And again, I'm just sharing with you the research. So this research, really well done as well. This is well over a decade ago. It showed that diets high in saturated fat and low in carbohydrates can increase inflammatory markers in the body. And I've talked about this before with lipopolysaccharides, with different forms of inflammatory markers in the body. Doesn't mean you can't eat some saturated fat. I'm not saying that at all. But what happens is when we tip too far to one macro and not enough of another, especially to bind it and pull it from the body, there can be issues. One more that I wanted to add, I didn't know if I was going to add this or not, but there is actually some pretty good evidence in some people, not all, that on a higher fat and or higher protein diet and lower carbs, it can increase oxidative cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, and potentially throw off heart-based inflammation in general. This one was about 9 years ago on this particular study, and it compared low carbohydrate diets to low-fat diets and their effect on the cardiovascular system, included lipid profiles. And what they looked at it is that you want more of a balanced diet. You really do. There is no one diet that tips like, oh, you should be eating 60% protein or 60%, 70% fat or 90% carbs or 20% carbs. You actually want a more balanced diet. And when you have that, your body is getting all the nutrients, not just macros, not just fats, proteins, and carbs, but actually the micronutrients. And even in those micronutrients, I might add in fiber as well. These are things that the human body was meant to get that can act as its own little detox system to pull things out of the body, such as fiber, or the other nutrients that you will get from more carbohydrates that provide short-term energy for the body, long-term stored fuel, but also it's going to be the proper fuel for the gut microbiome. And the microbiome is made up of the bacteria that affects our immune system, that affects what we absorb, and it also affects our mood as well. So hopefully today's show was helpful. My goal for you is, again, to do the body transformation, the weight loss, the weight gain, whatever it is that you're looking to achieve, or overall health. Do it the right way, right? I understand that there's benefits to low carb, but make sure that if you're going low carb, that it's not for too long and that you have a plan to be able to reintroduce those carbohydrates back in your diet. Hopefully today's show was helpful. For all the show notes, head on over to StephenCabral.com/2896. Take care. Did you know that the body really only becomes sick or imbalanced in only two ways? Over time, you become deficient in vital nutrients, and you also accumulate toxins internally and from the environment. As those nutrients diminish and you increase your total toxic load, your body then begins to show the first signs of dis-ease. It's actually quite predictable, and the good news is that if we know how you began to fill up that proverbial rain barrel, we also know how to empty it to begin the healing process. I was fortunate enough to learn this ancient healing process from my mentor after suffering from debilitating diseases for close to a decade. It was only when I began to implement these techniques did I finally overcome my illnesses and go on to live a life of energy and vitality that I now enjoy. I'd like to share with you now what I discovered after traveling all over the world and how to combine the best of ancient healing wisdom with state-of-the-art science. Allow me to teach you exactly how I've been able to help over 250,000 people to empty their rain barrel and begin to transform their body and lives into what they've always hoped they could be. To get your copy of the international bestseller, The Rain Barrel Effect, simply go to stephencabral.com/rainbarrel.